let me go with this during the break. So today we start with Marx, and I'll show you how independent he stemmed from Ricardo in particular. And in particular, the most important, I think, for contemporary times, for today, the most important aspect of Marx is that he is the first one to have formulated a complete theory of the business cycle, of trade cycle, and of unemployment. I think this is the most important aspect.
Of trade cycle, sorry, on what?
And unemployment, and of unemployment, okay? And this stuff comes back and back and back and back. There is a guy at Harvard University who is a labor economist. I used his work a number of times, but I don't remember his name. I truly don't remember his name, but he's a very good. I mean, he does work on labor supply in the world. And well, he says, you know, I got those ideas from Marx's theory of unemployment, you know? And he applied it to the whole world, and he actually says very interesting things. And so I think that is the most important stuff that we have to retain from Marx today. And many other things are not necessarily valid, but that stuff is the most important. Right. So first, I want to show you his treatment of the physiocrats. Yeah, Marx read everything that was under the sun. He read everything. Yeah? And I will show you later, when we come to his notion of scientific economics. Economics as a science. He's the one who invented the notion. He considered that economics can become science. You know? I think he pushed himself a bit too far in that respect. But he and Engels were absolutely convinced that economics could be a science. Yeah? And he based his approach by, of course, combining the German philosophy with British political economy. That's what he did. Yeah? And it is through his dialectical understanding that he considered British political economy to be the beginning of a science in economics. So he treated Adam Smith and Ricardo as scientists. These people who discovered, what does it mean scientist? What does it mean scientist? Scientist means that you discover a law, right? That you don't talk about metaphysics and this and that you understand why, you know, if you drop something, why it falls in a particular way. Yeah? That's a law of gravity. I mean, they were all influenced very much by Newtonian and Galilean physics. Yeah? And Engels, who actually knew a lot of science himself, does say, he wrote a book, a little book called Anti-Turin, which is a critique of sort of some kind of positivistic and idealistic approach. And he wrote this book Anti-Turin, critical to dialectical philosophy. And in the book, he actually says, you need abstraction because you can look, description doesn't help you. Because he says you can look at water as long as you like, he uses this example. You can look at water as long as you like. By looking at water and describing the water, it's clear, it's dirty, it has waves, and etc., you will never understand that water is based on two inflammable gases, right? Water is based on hydrogen and oxygen. And it's the combination of those two. That's why you put oxygen and hydrogen together and you get water. You separate them and you get two gases that catch fire anytime. But in order to get to that, you need theory. You need abstraction, because if you just look at water and you describe water, you will never get to it. Yeah? So you need theoretical construction. And you have to discover laws. So in Marx and Engels, the notion of the working of an economy is characterized by laws, like you have laws in physics, like you have laws in chemistry. You see, that's how they saw it. It's not whimsical, it's not whims. And this is why Marx considered Sir William Petty, who wrote that little book in Ireland in the 17th century, Political Arithmetic, as the beginning of political economy, because Sir William Petty says, Petty's endeavor was to show relations which were, as he put it, independent of appetites and passions of particular men. That's the quotation that I have from Petty himself. With the physiocrats and the classics, he thinks that a science was there, that was a science. Okay? What Marx does is that he says, okay, but this is a science only for the capitalist mode of production. You follow? So it's not an eternal system. Every social formation, every stage in economic history, every social formation has its own laws. So the classics are important, Adam Smith and Ricardo, for the understanding of the working of the capitalist mode of production. Okay? He never called capitalism. Never. He actually rejected this because the French used to call it. Yeah? The term capitalism is French. Okay? Like the term socialism is French, and Marx never has this. You look through Das Kapital, there is you never find the term socialism in Marx. Never. You never find the term capitalism in Marx. Today we use it because we are not so rigorous. Marx always used his German term of capitalist mode of production. Yeah? So which is very precise, very specified. That is to say, is the accumulation of capital by means of labor, the utilization of labor. That's what it is. The capitalist mode of production, never capitalism in general. The same thing we never talked about, never defined socialism. Socialism is defined in terms of society of producers. Okay? Society of producers. That is to say, the producers themselves run the society. Because in the capitalist mode of production, there is a separation between those who run the society, who are the owners of capital, and those who produce, who are essentially the wage labor, the workers, etc. In society of producers, the producers themselves run. But he was not very detailed about it. I mean, he did not, he said, we have to understand capitalism first, you know, the capitalist mode of production. And it's also interesting how he got to it. Because, you see, people, because of the role of ideology that played in Marxism, so ideologies, sometimes it's good, yeah? Sometimes you need ideology, no? You don't need, like you need religion, sometimes you, but don't get stuck onto it, otherwise you go crazy. But the reality is that when ideology became so dominant, and essentially through the two big socialist and communist revolutions, right? The Soviet one, the Russian revolution, and the Chinese. These are the two revolutions that made Marxism into an ideology, right? These are the two. One through Lenin, much less Lenin, but more later, okay, more later with Stalin and stuff, which never really left this framework. Although the Institute of Marxism-Leninism in the USSR was really the best. You know, they did the editing of all Marx and Engels' works with absolute epistemological, philological precision. It's still the best stuff. Still the best. It's not that they manipulated. They not manipulated. And but there was an ideology. There was an ideological structure which essentially prevented the development of analysis, also following Marx, and the same thing even worse in China. And but so people the ideology tends to present Marxian thinking as a sort of consistent process from the Communist Manifesto till the writing of Das Kapital, till actually the writing of the Grundrisse, the publications of the Grundrisse, which is the notebooks on capital. Okay? The publication of the Grundrisse were made in Moscow in it was also quite interesting, was made in 1942 in Moscow, 1942. The 1942 was not a normal year in Moscow, right? in Soviet Union, 1942. Right? And the Institute of Marxism-Leninism in Moscow worked, through the papers of Marx, published the Grundrisse in 1942. Right? It's always presented as a sort of in the ideology as a linear, as a consistent, but it's not. And he himself says that, by the way. He and Engels, because in 1848, when they published the Communist Manifesto, that's a pamphlet, the Communist Manifesto. There's some interesting points, ideas, but basically their belief was, they believed, Marx and Friedrich Engels, that a proletarian revolution was in the process, okay? Was about to happen, was happening. That the revolution in Berlin, in Vienna, Paris, only the English slept, okay? Everybody got excited. There was also in Italy, in Milan. Milan was both bourgeois and working class, okay? It was bourgeois because it was working class, but was bourgeoisie that wanted the unification, nationalist type unification of Italy. And there was, where was it? So Brussels, in Brussels, there were the famous 1848. And they were convinced then that that's it, that there is this new class, the working class, that is emerging, like the bourgeoisie emerged during first the British Revolution of Cromwell, then later with the French Revolution, especially with Napoleon. Napoleon is the victory of the bourgeoisie in France, right? Because the others, they were a bit, they were not necessarily completely bourgeois side. Like Robespierre was not completely on the bourgeois side. Yeah? The bourgeoisie, the merchant, and the bourgeoisie was with Napoleon. The state and the bourgeoisie together, that's Napoleon. But it said, okay, this is the new work, this is a new class which is emerging, and it is emerging from the conditions of production of capitalism. That's what, but it did not happen that way. It did not happen. It didn't happen. In fact, after 1848, I keep making this mistake, after 1848, bourgeois capitalism became even stronger in Europe. not weaker, okay? With Napoleon III in France, that's the creation of France as a strong capitalist country. It's through Napoleon III, not before. Yeah? The development of imperialism. So the definitive conquest of India by Britain. The development of industry and especially of capitalistic industry in Germany. That's after 1848. It's not before. Yeah. So capitalism became stronger, not weaker. And Italy also was formed. So that was another big country, which that created the condition for real capitalist development in the north here, in this area. Now dying, this area is now dead. The sphere went back. And so, and they understood that. I mean, they were not stupid people, you know, Marx and Engels. They made especially Marx, crazy. Marx, no, Engels was not crazy. Marx. But then the last thing that you can say is that they were stupid. And they wrote a book, okay, which is, because everything they said, then they transformed it into a book, so they write it. And in fact, he was not feeding anyone. You know that Marx had family in London, etc., and he was not feeding anyone. You know, they lived not completely in poverty, because Engels was sending them money. Okay, he wasn't working. So he was not working because he did not have time to work. You know, he was in the British Library and studying, etc., etc. So they didn't have much money. So and everything that they were thinking, that they were doing, especially Marx, write down a book, or many pages that would later become books. And they wrote a book which is called The Critique of the German Ideology. It's called The German Ideology, which is a critique of Hegelism. Yeah. It's a critique of Hegel, of the idealistic aspect of dialectics. Okay? The critique of the view that ideas determine reality. Ideas don't determine reality is the famous materialistic conception of history. But they say in that book, we believed that in 1848 that there would be a revolution. And that turned out to be wrong. Therefore, we decided that we should now really study the capitalist mode of production, because we cannot just write pamphlets. We have to study the capitalist mode of production. And this is what Marx set out to do. In volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and volume 4 of Capital. Volume 4 of Capital is the theories of surplus value, which is the last, in which he analyzes, it's like an appendix, in which he analyzes all the previous theories of economics before him. Yeah? And this is very important because then he brings out he highlights the importance of participants. Okay, this is it's actually quoted in my lecture notes. So he says, you see, here this is that. The analysis of capital within the bourgeois horizon is essentially the work of the participants. So, why is so they are the true fathers of modern political economy. In fact, later you would say that they are the first to have established scientifically the principles of political economy. Because they identify the material basis of capital. The material basis means physical capital, means means of production, means machinery, means plows, means all the tools that make the capital, okay? And they said However, for them, for the physiocrats, the bourgeois forms of production necessarily appeared as natural form. Okay, so they identified material laws. The error is only that the material law of a definite historical social stage is conceived as an abstract law governing equally all forms of society. So this is not the case. Now it's interesting when he writes, when he published the first volume of Capital. This is the theory of surplus value. That's the appendix. That's the end, the last volume, volume 4 of Capital. When he published, when he published the second edition, first printing, second printing of the first volume of Capital, he has an introduction, Marx. He wrote his own introduction, his own preface and stuff like that. And he reviews, he goes through all the reviews that he obtained, that he got for the first edition. He goes, yeah? And he says, well, basically, no one understood me. Yeah? Okay, I understand. I write in a difficult language and in a complex way in the language in German. Not only he wrote in German, but he also wrote in a difficult manner in German. Okay? Therefore, I can understand. I write in people, I can understand. But people should have made an effort to understand it. And he says the only ones that understood what I'm exactly about are, guess who?
The physiocrat.
Huh? The physiocrat did not exist anymore. No, I tell you, I just want to go back. The Russians. Yes. Now, Capital, just want to go to Capital. He has an introduction. Just, I don't know whether I get it right in Das Kapital or. Okay, here it is. No, Capital. Yeah, introduction. See, it's all right. No, not like this. Not like this version. That's the. This is, by the way, the library Genesis. I sent, I think, to everyone. It must be here. To the second edition, I just have to find it. And this, where he says, preface to the French second German edition. Okay, here it is. This is also where he says that the revolutions. Okay, here it is. He says. He quotes. By the way, it's very interesting. It sort of gives you very good information about how well, how rich was the British Library, because he didn't get. How could he read this stuff? And it also gives information that he read Russian. And he could get that stuff from the British Library. So he says that the review that appeared in a journal called European Messenger, which was St. Petersburg, okay, which is a review dealing with the method of Das Kapital. It doesn't mention the author. He says, he perfectly understood, that reviewer perfectly understood what I am up to. Okay, what is my objective? Perfectly understood. And he says, even my objective is expressed even better than I would, okay? It's expressed even better than I would have done by just quoting the Russian reviewer from St. Petersburg. And before that, he quoted another one from professor from just a bit about from Kiev University, who also understood what he was about. So he says the one thing. This is the Russian Bible, okay? But he doesn't give the name of this person. The one thing which is of moment, of importance to Marx, is to find the law of the phenomenon with whose investigation he is concerned. And not only is that law of importance, of moment to him, which governs these phenomena insofar as they have a definite form and mutual connections within a given historical period. So it's the law in the context of a specific historical period. Of still greater moment to him is the law of their variation, of their development. Law of variation, this is a very scientific form of expression. The law of variation, it's actually a mathematical form of expression. Okay? That is, i.e. of the transition from one form to another, from one series of connections into a different one. This law, once discovered, he investigates, the Russian reviewer says, he investigates in detail the effects in which it manifests itself in social life. Consequently, Marx only troubles himself about one thing, to show by rigid scientific investigation the necessity of successive determinate orders of social conditions, and to establish as impartially as possible the facts that serve him for fundamental starting points. For this it is quite enough if it proves at the same time both the necessity of the present order of things and the necessity of another order into which the first must inevitably pass over. So this is why Marx, if you read, this is a certain link can be established with the Communist Manifesto, because most of the Communist Manifesto is a critique of the socialists, you know that. Most of the Communist Manifesto is a critique of socialist French ideas, right? Essentially, because they say that they are baseless, they are not based on understanding of the actual evolution mechanisms of the capitalist mode of production, okay? And this is why Marx is not a radical, he's a revolutionary, but not radical, because he's not protesting against something. There is no protest against something. There is the understanding why there are contradictions in the system, and why the system has to operate on the basis of this contradiction, why the system requires those contradictions. And this is important in relation to this theory of unemployment, because the theory of unemployment in Marx is not that unemployment is a bad thing. It's not because unemployment generates poverty. It's not this. Unemployment in Marx is the necessary condition for the revival of the capitalist mode of production. So unemployment is socially a problem for the people who are unemployed, okay? But at the same time, unemployment is a necessary instrument in the hands, in the working, not even in the hands, because this is all happening independently of any plot or any scheming by the capitalists. It's happening as the consequence of the processes of competition, of the forces of competition. Unemployment is necessary for the dynamics of the capitalist mode of production. Okay? Now, I want to say that this is both a very important scientific proposition, but at the same time may not be valid, okay? it may not be valid. Or if it is valid, it may not be valid in the way in which Marx thought it would be valid. Okay? It's very important to understand. But that's his view that unemployment is not a, so to speak, a failure of the system. It's not that the system fails. It's the system requires unemployment for it to work. And therefore, this is why unemployment in Marx is not a static thing. It's not unemployment, 10%, 10%. It's cyclical unemployment, okay? Because it's connected to the cycle of capital accumulation, which we will discuss today. Okay. And this necessity, what is at the same time the fact that the system is not eternal, it's always bounded by its historical conditions, and the necessity of another order into which the first order must inevitably pass over, and this the reviewer clearly refers to Marx's argument about the fact that capitalism didn't fall from the skies. It is the product of the previous pre-capitalist feudal mode of production. It is the mechanism that led to the disintegration of the mode of production and then generated the capitalist system. And all this transition, all these dynamics is independent of whether people believe or do not believe it, whether they are conscious or unconscious. Okay? The law of gravity operates, doesn't matter, you don't have to know, even if you don't know physics, you'll be subjected to the law of gravity. So whether you know physics or you don't know physics, it's immaterial to the operation of the law of gravity or to the fact that water is made of oxygens and hydrogen is completely independent of your consciousness about it or whether you are not aware of it. Okay? Marx treats the social movement as a process of natural history, governed by laws not only independent of human will, consciousness, and intelligence, but rather, on the contrary, determining that will, consciousness, and intelligence. If in history of civilization the conscious element plays a part so subordinate, then it is self-evident that a critical inquiry into subject matter of civilization can, less than anything else, have for its basis any form or any result of consciousness. Okay, well, that is to say, and it gets the essence of the materialistic approach of Marx, that is to say, says the Russian reviewer, that not the idea but the material phenomenon alone can serve as the starting point. Such an inquiry will confine itself to the confrontation and the comparison of a fact, not with ideas, but with another fact. Marx then says, this is perfectly what I meant, what I intended to do. And so now we move to Marx's. Okay. I can start right away with the theory of, I could start right away with the theory of the business cycle, but I will first present a bit his labor theory of value. Why did Marx, what was the interest in Marx to defend Ricardo against Malthus so strongly, besides the fact that he did not like Malthus because he considered Malthus to be somebody who wanted to have servants, etc., unproductive labor and so on. Besides all, why did he analytically defend Ricardo? And in fact, he criticized Ricardo for not answering Malthus properly, okay? Because he believed even more, for Marx, the separation between value and distribution. which characterize Ricardo is even more important than Marx. It's even more important than Ricardo. So Marx has to prove, to argue, that the labor theory of value of Ricardo is correct. It's correct. Okay? And the way in which he does it is not satisfactory. He devotes most of the third volume of Capital to that. It has been sort of adjusted later somehow. But I want to explain why it is so important for Marx. In Ricardo, once he determines that values, prices, are the result of the quantity of labor time necessary to produce commodities. Okay? So 5 hours, one commodity, 10 hours to produce second commodity, so you need two 5-hour commodities against one 10-hour commodity. Once we establish that, then the issue, he sets it aside. He doesn't come back to the issue of value, Ricardo. He focuses on distribution. Because once you decide that you establish that the value of a commodity is determined by the technique of production, that is, by the quantity of labor time necessary to produce it, within that quantity of labor time, you will obtain, the value will be then split into wages, profits, rent, and so on. And then focuses on distribution. In the case of Marx, it's a different story, because in the case of Marx, exactly the same theory. So if you say there is a press conference, in which with CNN, BBC, and etc., and all the television, Al Jazeera, RT, and so on, they're all there, and they asked Ricardo and Marx, they said, how are prices determined? Both Marx and Ricardo would give the same. They asked Ricardo first, okay? They would say prices are determined by, in the long run, and day to day, prices, God knows, they fluctuate according to conditions of demand and supply, etc. But that's not. What is the gravitational point, the core? The gravitational point is the quantity of labor time necessary to produce commodities. That's it. And Marx said, yes, I agree with him, I don't have anything else to say. But he would say a lot of more things, he spoke as much as he could. But especially he wrote as much as he could. And he said, I agree with him. So they would agree. Second question, where do profits come from? Ricardo said, well, because wages are in subsistence, and you take away the rent, the rest is profit. Okay, so okay, he would say wages are determined, fixed first. Marx said, yes, I agree. He would not totally agree, but say, yeah, more or less. Because wages, you have to make sure that wages are subsistence wages, because otherwise you don't get capital accumulation. Okay? Because remember, wages are capital. Remember that I said yesterday. Okay. And so wages are fixed first. So if you have a harvest of 100 tons, say in a farm, then you have to fix wages. First, say 50 tons to wages, to the workers, not every single worker, to 50 tons. And then the rest, say 30 tons to rent, 20 tons investment. Investment fund, going back into production. That's how Ricardo would answer. Therefore, he would say, look, the lower the rent, the better for profits, because wages are always 50 tons, okay? Because they are subsistence wages, so they don't move. So you have to squeeze out the rent and get more profits. Profits mean investment in Ricardo automatically investment, and therefore this is how profits are determined. They are determined as a residual. Because first you fix wages, take away the rent, the rest is profit. Profit is a residual. Marx says, look, he hasn't understood anything. That's what Marx said. Marx would say, no, here he would agree totally. Would disagree totally. Disagree totally. He would say, please, I explain. He does forget. Yeah. I would now explain to the BBC people. I would explain. So I'm going to explain to you where profits come from. Profits come from labor values, from surplus value. So David Ricardo does not have surplus value in his framework. Okay? It is Marx who introduces the notion of surplus value, which comes from value itself. See? So profits come from value. This is so this is why he has to make absolutely sure that the labor theory of value is foolproof, is correct. You understand? Because otherwise things become wobbly. Yeah? And so Marx says, this guy, Ricardo, he doesn't, because he still believes that the capitalist mode of production is eternal. He takes it as a natural, like the Russian pointed out, the reviewer from St. Petersburg. And he believes that the capitalist mode of production is eternal. Therefore, he doesn't see the dialectical process within the capitalist mode of production. The dialectical process is the following. He's talking to the BBC, so he has to make things a bit simple but clear. And he said, the worker, the average, in terms of average, okay? What he calls socially necessary labor time is the average technique of production. The worker works with the socially necessary, produces on the basis of the socially necessary labor time. Okay? You understand?
Socially necessary?
Labor time. Labor. Which means the average. It's average productivity. That's what I try to translate it in contemporary terms. It means average productivity. Okay? Socially necessary works 10 hours a day. England of the 19th century. So 10 hours a day. That's the average social labor time which is put into production. 10 hours a day. And he gets paid by, he has all these examples in shillings, etc. Forget, let's have it in euro or dollars. It's easier because to count shillings is a very complicated story. And so he gets paid, say, whatever, 10 euros an hour, okay? So by the end of the day, if he works 10 hours, he gets 100 euros, okay? You agree? 10 by 10 is 100, okay? It's simple. Well, I'm going to tell you, folks, that he's actually getting 50% of the value of his product, of what he produced. Okay? So there's a contract here, there's a contract. The worker has been hired, or the workers, okay? As we are talking about the average worker, has been hired to work 10 hours a day for 2 years, 3 months, doesn't matter, a week. Huh? He's been hired to work 10 hours a day. He's been paid 10 euros an hour, per hour. And then you are telling me that he's actually getting 50%, but no, he gets 100 euros or dollars. Therefore, it's not true, he gets paid. When the worker goes to the supermarket by the end of the day or the end of the week or the month, whatever it is, and spends the money, ask yourself how many hours would be needed by the average workers, okay, to work, to produce the things that the workers buy. You follow me? So how many hours are contained in the commodities, in the production of commodities with which the worker, on which the worker spends all his money, all his wage. So you'll find out that the worker gets back I make an example, gets back 50%. In other words, the worker works 10 hours, but actually buys for himself 5 hours. 5 hours, the worker works free from the capitalist. It doesn't show in any contract. It's simply the fact that the amount of labor time necessary to produce the commodities which are contained in the wage of the worker would require to be produced only 5 hours. Whereas the worker has worked 10 hours. Gets paid $10 an hour, or 10 euros an hour, gets 100 euros. When the worker spends those 100 euros and buys the different commodities, how many hours of work, how many hours have the workers who produced those commodities, how many hours have they worked? In order to produce those commodities, they would contain only 5 hours. This means that the average worker has worked 5 hours for free, not being paid. This is where the source of profit is. The source of profit is in surplus value, because if the worker were to be paid the entire amount, the real amount of his labor, there would be no profit in the system. There would be no profit. There would be no capital. Capital is based on appropriation of labor. Because capital is not based on the fact that you save 10 shillings, etc., and then you become rich and you invest. This is some nonsense, okay? Capital is based on appropriation of labor. Without labor, no capital. So that's the same thing as the classics, huh? Same thing as Adam Smith. You see, but the accent is different. The accentuation is different. But same, wages are capital in the classics. So is in Marx, okay? Huh? Out of labor time, that's why you need labor time. Out of labor time, you get surplus value, because part of the labor time bestowed, put by the workers in production is not paid. And it goes to the firm, to the capitalist company as profit. This is why for him it's so important that the labor theory of value be the true theory, okay? It's very important because that's where the source of profits come from. It transforms what in Ricardo is simply a solution to an answer to Malthus. In Ricardo, Malthus says, look, in the core model, your story works. But outside, when you have many different commodities, the story may not work. Then Ricardo replies, says, no, if you have different commodities, they need prices to compare. But these prices are determined by, in the long run, of course, as a gravitational element, are determined by the quantity of labor time necessary to produce commodities. That's it, So don't bother me anymore. And then he goes to discuss the distribution of output between wages, profits, and rent. But where do profits come from, he doesn't tell you. What is the real source, the analytical source of profits? It's Marx, that uses the labor theory of value, because what he does is split the labor time worked by the average worker into two parts. One part which is reappropriated by the worker in the form of wages, and another part which goes to the capitalist in the form of profits. Capitalist company, corporation, doesn't matter. Yeah? This is so, for him, the labor theory of value has to be the true theory. It's very important for him to solve the Ricardo problem. Very, very important. By the way, a notion of exploitation, you can also, this is called exploitation. Okay, that's what Marx calls exploitation. Exploitation is surplus labor. That is the labor which is given in surplus to the requirement of the workers to work for herself, himself. Okay? The extra labor time. So it's called surplus labor. Okay? But you can also get the notion of exploitation in a Ricardian framework. You can get it. But it is very cumbersome and very limited. Say that we are in an agricultural world, capitalist agriculture, okay? And there is a contract, the wage, everything is paid in corn, everything is paid in wheat, corn, whatever, physical. And the workers, the agricultural laborers, they get back 50% of the harvest as wages. Okay, they get 50%. 50% goes to pay rent, like in Ricardo. But you can say that the workers have worked 50%. They work 10 hours a day in the field. They get 50% of the harvest. This means that the wage is equal to 5 hours.
Yes.
You can exact, but this is true in physical sense. You cannot establish how many cars the workers get back with their wages. Do you follow me? When you have many different commodities, with the harvest it's clear, it's food. You transform everything into food, and therefore it becomes sort of visually clear. But if you work in the steel industry, you can say how many steel ingots do they get back, or you work in the chemical industry, so how many, I don't know, hectoliters, tons of chemicals they take home as a wage, you know, after having worked. This doesn't make sense, you follow? So you need a theory of value, whereby also in terms of the chemical industry, of the steel industry, you can say, look, the worker has worked in the steel industry 10 hours, however, to produce the wages, to produce the food, the commodities that are bought by his wages, only 5 hours. He would have had to work only 5 hours, not 10 hours. You follow? And at this point, in value terms, you don't have to express how many pieces of steel the worker gets back as wages. You follow me? Because you have everything in terms of value, no longer in terms of physical. So the physical example of exploitation you can get in an agriculture by saying the workers get back 50% of the harvest, and the rest they give it free to the landowners and so forth, and the farmer, capitalist farmer. That's only valid in agriculture. When it comes to complex industry, you must have a theory of value. If you want to make the same argument, you must have a theory of value. And that's why in Marx, the labor theory of value of Ricardo is so important. This is why it is so important. Okay? Okay. Yeah.
I have a question, because I really quickly mentioned about the labor time and the relevant commodities. There is a function between the labor time and the commodity, because certain labor time and also the commodity value. And you mentioned there is a wage. The people that mentioned that there is a wage basket.
Yeah.
Inside, my understanding is that the wage basket is a derivative from the function between labor time and the commodity. Do you get me?
No.
I mean, there is a function between the labor time and the community value because we see that there's a different labor time defines the values,
Yeah.
and it's always a function. We look at which basket because different communities, which basket is the derivatives from the function of between the two.
Commodities.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, from the function between the two objectives.
Well, for him it's simple. In the case of Marx, he takes the classical view of subsistence wages.
Yes.
So the basket of commodities is determined by subsistence conditions. It's all simple.
So it is different. So I may be mistaken. I understand that. I just try to think that it's a function, it's a derivative function, but my understanding may be wrong because there is no the commanded principle like to solve the function to regard it as a new derivatives. I mean, I could use the mathematics later.
Okay, you can write it to me because
Okay, yes.
this is something that I have to see in writing to
Yes,
answer.
okay.
I'm not able to answer because I'm not grasping exactly the question. So you write to me.
Oh, okay.
Mm. But the view of wages and commodity composition of wages in the classical world is very simple. It's made of corn. It's made of it's made of very basic commodities because the workers were poor, and it's like you have a CPI, like you have consumer price inflation. The consumer price index is based on a basket, right?
Yes.
It's the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. By the way, you can also have the notion of exploitation without any reference to the labor theory of value today. Okay? Is that you don't get it, the analytical implications and the philosophical implication clear. But if you have in every statistical account for any country, take OECD, you take, okay, I'm not talking about the methods which are used in the statistical method, but they tell you that there is something like an average productivity of labor, right? And they tell you that there is also an average wage, right? Well, the difference between the productivity of labor and the average wage, that's the same thing. It's like the surplus value in Marx. It's exactly the same thing. Productivity of labor is measured in euro, constant prices, etc. Is per worker, I don't know, can be 15,000 euros a year per worker, whereas the wage per year is say 10,000, let's say 10,000 a year, 11, 12,000 a year on average, right? Then you would say that that's the difference. About the worker has produced 15,000 euro a year in terms of labor productivity and gets a wage of 12,000 euros a year in terms of that's productivity of labor, and that's the same notion of exploitation in Marx. Today you can do it in terms of productivity of labor, the relation between wages and productivity of labor. It's the same thing. Yeah. The notion of productivity of labor defined as today did not exist yet in those days. So the labor theory of values supply the framework to get to that. Okay? So, but of course, analytically, it's very important that in Marx, the separation between value and distribution remains. And this comes about. This is not just theory. In Marx, it's not just theory. Because there was another big conference where BBC, CNN, they all went and Marx spoke. Okay? It was broadcast, there was streaming, and there was YouTube, everything. Okay? That was the first Congress, the first ever meeting, the first foundation of the first international in London. Yeah? The first international in London. Which was 1861, 1860, I don't remember, 1869, 1860, I don't remember, you can look into Wikipedia. And there Marx, everybody was, Marx announces, that's the only time that he spoke at a socialist meeting. Then he hated them all, and he didn't talk to them anymore, okay? He didn't talk to any of them. He announced that he would give a speech. And the speech became known as a little pamphlet, which is an excellent pamphlet for understanding capital. Because basically there, he summarizes, he puts the essence of the first volume of Capital is in that pamphlet, which is called, there are two titles of them. Wage, price, and profit. Okay? It's also, sometimes it's wage, value, and profit. The benefit, I think there are two editions that the Moscow edition is, I think, wage, price, and profit. The Beijing edition is wage, value, and profit, I think. But it's the same pamphlet, it's exactly the same. And there, he speaks about, this where he first formulates the theory of unemployment in a very simple way. He speaks against a trade unionist, a British trade unionist. British trade unionist, simple guy, good guy. Good guy. He says, look, his name is Citizen Western, because they used to call themselves in the terms of the French Revolution, citoyen, during the First International. So, Citizen Western gets onto the podium and says, we are struggling for higher wages. And what do we see by the end of the day? When we get a wage increase, we see prices going up. So we lose on the price side what we gain in terms of wage struggles, right? But the guy was not wrong, the poor guy was not wrong. The only problem that he had in front of him was Marx. See? And Marx gets onto the podium, he announces, so everybody's there, as I said, BBC, CNN, etc. Everybody's there, television, and he gets onto the podium and he attacks poor Citizen Western. He makes him appear stupid, and Citizen Western was not wrong, was not completely wrong. Then he might have been partially wrong, but today he will not be wrong at all. And Marx attacks him. Makes him appear. First 5 pages is a classic, demolishes him. Just says that he does, that he's analytical, he's a complete charlatan, and etc., etc. And then he says, then he comes to the essence, and he says, wages and a change in wages does not affect prices. A change in wages affects the distribution between profits and wages. You see? So he's extremely faithful to Ricardo in that respect. Separation between wages, between value and distribution. An increase in wages does not affect prices. And then he explains, on the basis of the labor theory of value, he explains. Prices are determined by the quantity of labor time which is technically, on average, required to produce commodities. Therefore, a change in wages determines the distribution between wages and profits. Okay? Do you follow? If prices are determined only by the quantity of labor time necessary to produce commodity, And in this labor time, we have to put profits, wages, and rent. This labor time is given, so a change in wages only changes the way in which profits, wages, and rent are distributed. Do you follow? It doesn't affect prices. And he attacks Wesley by saying, look, it's wrong. Wages do not affect prices. Changes in wages do not impact upon prices. They impact upon distribution. The next question is, and we'll have here a break, and then the next question is, what makes wages change? Why is there such a thing as a change in wages? And this is where he develops the theory of the business cycle. That's where he brings forward the theory of the business cycle, of the trade cycle. Okay? So we'll do that in the next. So we have about 10-15 minutes break.
No.
That means that Soviet power is communism without that's what they Soviet power is
When they ended the job, and if you listen inside, you must not be doing and they will be free. Let's go. What? Oh, doing something. So because you get this marketing. Yeah.
It's back to the US medical
This is
The basket for me, I think it's like a derivative function. It's a new function for me. A new function because we have a function. There is there is the certain amount of label. There's a quantity of the label, mean the outputs for the label. And you put it into that. It's like a function. Okay, it's input, and you get an output. That's a function. Now we have a basket for a widget basket for different complexity. My question is a basket is kind of a derivative from this function? I mean, do you understand me? Okay. So that's my question. Because I want to take because it's like a curve, we want to take the slope. Possibly it would be a slope because it can be a function, it's not a very complicated function, or quantity, later time. Value. There can be a linear growth. Linear growth. There can be a linear growth. If it's linear growth, the slope is always uniform. It's the only one. So that's my question. Because the derivatives can be only one. Do you know the derivatives? Okay, so you didn't understand me actually. You didn't understand me if you don't know derivatives. Derivatives is like you have a function. This is a box. This is a box. Like this is a box. I want to put something into this box. That's we call the quantity of label 10. Okay, put it into that. Then come out another as a function. Okay, this index can be changed. Like the label 10 can be changed. The value can be changed. And we change this value. Now it's going to my focus. My question is
Can we talk about it later when we finish?
no, I already Yeah. What is it? Because I had a conference.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Before the grass.
It's time to see.
Oh.
This is good.
It's not done.
Recent changes in board decisions that affect individuals rights about You're going to go to the next one in February.
Well, a little bit to the wire. When you next go to the university.
Yeah, we were speaking until the last minute. We had breakfast and then we had discussions and so forth.
But it's very European.
Yeah, I was thinking about him. He was the one who forced that professor into exile in the UK. Ali
Are we expecting how you feel?
We don't want to speak. That's
I think more complex because it's kind of community regulation and directive.
Oh, you're on Facebook?
Yeah,
Let me add you.
Working groups. They were always talking about Article 29, which is the working group of the European Commission on Data Protection. So they get together all the authorities from each country, like Poland, France, and they work together and what kind of improvements they need for data protection, protect citizens' rights using.
I'm using the same name.
Because we don't have anything actually. We don't have a general law for data protection. We don't have institutional arrangements to protect data protection. And by this I mean an authority that can regulate the market and punish when a company, for instance, uses illegally data from you. And I think this happens basically because of the influence of the US model, which is focused on consumers' rights and an authority for consumer protection. So we deal with the issue of data protection in Brazil as consumers' rights. Not in the same way as Europe, which is a fundamental right, which has specific design
For transaction to the non-economic issues that we have seen. Marks really care about contracts.
And it's weird, because if you take the whole Latin America,
There is
all the countries follow the Latin model. Argentina, Chile,
there is no free contract.
Yeah.
There is no contract.
Brazil has always been the old Dutch in Latin America, the big Dutch in Latin America. We'd rather go in the US model instead of the European model. So this is, and personally, I advocate in Brazil for a European model. And I did a conference and wrote papers for authorities. It's a really complex issue because many big companies, especially American companies that operate in Brazil, they don't like the European model at all. So they make a lot of lobbying in Brazilian in the capital to block this kind of initiative to reform the legal system. So it's stuck. It's stuck for 5 years actually. Because there is a project to create a general data protection law in Brazil and create an authority. The data protection authority, just like it has in Europe. Companies are completely against it. They say that if this model is built, it's going to stifle innovation in the country.
Yeah.
And it's very rich for study because you have economic arguments and legal arguments being clashed. We find different kinds of reasoning. If you consider the innovation argument, just think about economic arguments.
Do you know where the clinic will take place today?
I've seen the email.
What I
Have you
don't.
have you also seen it?
Yes, I have seen the
I've
email.
never been there.
I cannot in fact trace it out. That's my problem.
Have you understood? You know the clinics three? We have the international European one, the migration law in practice, and microcredit. How is the option? Was I think was
But let's see.
I wish to attend both for learning purpose, but
Yeah.
exam.
I've read many articles about European
That is in the curriculum. History. Well, I did not notice that.
Because, for example, today we have this international European migration law, but still we have such migration law in practice, which the advocate will teach, and we have the microcredit. Yeah. Taking me in conversation. So please, go this side.
Maybe when we go there today, we can ask about that.
Yeah, because it is confusing and every person has.
Don't know what. Because what I know from last year is because there was never micro clinic.
Okay.
So, but what they do is those who go for international European migration, those who study it, also do it in practice. And I have 2 books that they have published, the students of last year and the year before last, on that, because they go to the immigrants and ask them about these things. Do you understand? So there is the law that you learn in the class theoretically, and what your research, your assignments in practice.
Okay.
So So they published some book, publications on the two publications on this. They went to the asylum center. They went to the Torino. I cannot call it concentration camp. Detention and exploitation, explosion camp, where they retain foreigners or immigrants before they deport them back to their countries. So some take 3 months, 6 months, according to the report there. They don't have their human rights granted. So those students here, we are going to search. We are searching that, and they have put a good lot of accounts on that because they got direct interview with these, victims, and they were open to them. They told them everything. So it is like that. One, you learn about how the skills, you learn the skills here, and you go and practicalize them. I think I can find. No, but it's in my back.
The video. I've just seen the video.
That's how Google got so rich. They could develop so many products with their database. Because at the time you type something on Google, it's linked to your profile. And they can improve their search engine. You can do many things. So it's interesting to notice that behind this big issue you have a dispute over the meaning of law and how law should be constructed and applied.
It's going to be more and more complicated with the Internet of Things.
Yes, completely right. Because they're making provisions that in 20 years, 5 years. Yeah, but that's been made for 20, which is really long, the main objects of these units will have their own internet connection and internet IP and internet. And then a specific database for reporting how is it connected, what kind of data it is producing. So everything the professor writes in that board, for instance, is going to be linked to a specific IP on the internet, and it's going to register everything that it's doing. And this is going to provide an intelligence, artificial intelligence, capable of, for instance, suppose professor writes everything in this board, and then in the next year, when he begins to write it again, the database will know that it has 95% and he's going to finish the sentence in a certain way, and then it just finished by itself. This kind of intelligence. And we're going to deal with objects producing data about ourselves in a new way that never existed. You see how complex it is. People say it's going to be 2, 3, or 5 years, and we don't know how much money Google and these big, huge companies are investing in this field. Even the Brazilian Development Bank, they did a conference last year, and they said that the Brazilian government should really take it seriously, the Internet of Things economy, and should provide special credit lines for companies that are interested in developing machines and technology in this field with low interest rates.
So taking that into consideration of data protection, do you think there is a bigger need for data protection then?
What is it?
Taking into consideration the protections that they make, right? Do you think that there is a huge necessity for data protection? And not reach to the point that in 5 years it's artificial intelligence?
Yeah, but I think huge companies like Google are going to advance the agenda that if you have less rules and less regulations, economic development. I don't know. And what I'm afraid is that European scholars and some European thinkers are beginning to be afraid of
the difference that is becoming larger in expertise between American companies and European companies. And they're rethinking the Iraq's discourse in the sense that maybe Europe should reconsider this whole structure for legal protection, in order to promote European companies in these fields. So it's a kind of a race to the bottom, you know. If countries are competing for technology and economic development in this specific way, they're going to dismantle these rules for data protection because it's going to be an economic dispute. Or we can do a race to the top, you know, that countries can somehow harmonize their rules, and civil society in a global scale can pressure them to do it. And there's a nice book by Tim Wu. He's a professor at Columbia Law School. The other guy's professor at Harvard Law School, Jack something, I forgot his name. Tim Wu and Jack. Oh. And they made this diagnosis in 2009 that we could go to different paths, a race to the bottom or a race to the top. And it will all depend on civil society, our capacity of mobilization and to understand these things. Because if we don't understand, we don't make pressure. Yeah. It's going to be like, whatever, I just want to use my iPhone. Yeah, so it's like the question of consciousness, digital consciousness, like the raising of digital. And I'm starting to think that it's probably it's not going to be governable, the internet. I don't know. So, it's very interesting. What about the net beyond Brazil? Didn't get any arguments, concrete arguments. I think it was a bit no things were people that were involved didn't like it itself very much because we couldn't advance in many topics. It was like by the end if you read the document.
Hello again.
Just
How are you?
restates the general principles that they were already
Hello.
I'm scared of this camera.
You scared?
and
But you are using cameras in the town. So why are you scared?
all national legalities.
It's for
It's
me
not
ways.
like the same people on the national job.
It's only for legal reasons. Those in the town, in the street, what do you think are there?
Yeah,
Street?
they just use the same
Yeah,
name.
check the car.
Yeah.
Not the
Only the cars? You think so?
I think so.
And they divide it.
Because here you don't get
CGI, which is the steering
multa.
Multa. Samsung's like if a car run on a velocity that is above the real law.
There you can.
I think they are
It's like fees.
they will be on the Samsung, but there is a real law I think
Because it's French. I know in French. But I know
what is it in French?
They have power to lobby and mobilization that's so little compared to
Okay, but I mean here, if you
it's a completely unfair game.
if you are not, if you are
That's why I'm worried about
when you're walking, and you cross the street with the red traffic light, you don't get the fee.
Yeah, but don't you think that the cameras are also taking human traffic? That whether people are stealing or whether people are mistaken. So you can see the Paris case.
For the
You can realize that it's not only for cars and also
yeah, maybe, but I think that they are maybe the shop owner that could
Your
cover
plane is going to
that they are filming a little bit of the street or not.
See, yeah.
So even the most stakeholder is
Everything is on the view in this place by these secret cameras.
in a sense.
And you never know until you
Simple as
break the law.
Together 5 sectors.
So where is the program for Friday? Do you know where the place
What
is?
should we do?
Yeah. I mean, for the night, you mean?
I don't know, when is it starting?
8 p.m.
Yeah, it's best to for them to organize and prepare.
Where is the place?
It's close to the campus
With campus?
where we are going today.
I don't know that place as well.
Yeah, it's like the Law University.
I like the discourse.
And it's there. I mean, the club is there, it's just behind the campus.
Club? Are you going to
No, it's not a club. It's a club, it's not a real club. It's just a place where young people go.
And is it an open program? Or is it for the IUC?
No, it's an open program. It's not a private private. I was supposed to be there for
But what is the name of the program? Is it artistic or what is it?
I don't know, because it's called Circolo Arci. Yeah, there are many Circoli Arci in town. And you have to get the car to get there. And it lasts 1 year. And they expire the next year. And when you get the car, you can go for free in every Circolo Arci. But I don't know how to explain what's that. I mean, it's something that was created for young people. They can be club or also pub. Usually there is some music, so most of cases are club, but not fancy club. I mean, it's very easy one.
Okay.
That's what I was saying. I mean, you can go there pajama if you want. Like,
Okay. It's a community club.
yeah, kind of. I didn't want to get political, but yeah.
I think so.
Zero privacy. Imagine a guy who watches a lot of porn and he goes to the supermarket and but I think companies are smart enough to know which preferences could be made public and which not. Which is scary.
Yeah, but the thing is that if we're going to leave on their hands to do it, so we're going to be fine. So okay, let them decide.
It's okay, maybe we can redirect terrorism to attack
Super close, eh?
companies, software, big corporations. They're already studying this on it. They're already studying this on it.
It's still good. Yeah, check it out.
Should be interesting.
Non so se non sbaglierò perché con un paio di casi sul sito fotografico americano e in realtà poi alla fine non erano riusciti a farlo perché poi erano dei test invece in Europa che cazzo cercherò di calare maggiormente l'interesse quindi facevo studi anzi molto
So let's now discuss to give me the last one.
IUC class.
IUC class? So, when Marx wrote the first volume of Capital, he assumed that the labor theory of value was correct. Okay? He knew that there were big problems in it, and he devoted the third volume of Capital to discuss and try to solve. So the first volume is written on the assumption that commodities exchange according to the labor time necessary to produce them. So that is to say that Ricardo's labor theory of value holds. The speech that he gave at the First International in London, which appears in the little booklet, Wage, Price and Profit, is the synthesis of the first volume of Capital, and in particular of chapter 25 of volume 1 of Capital, which is chapter 25 using the Moscow edition, because you get the Moscow edition online, the online version of the Moscow edition, which is the best anyway. So it's, chapter 25 is called the General Law of Capital Accumulation. It's interesting that you get to the General Law of Capital Accumulation at the 25th chapter. Not somewhere, it takes 24 chapters to get to the General Law of Capital Accumulation. Now, this is very important to understand, because the rest is building the constituent part of what is the global process of capital accumulation. Okay? So first, this guy reformulates the liberty value of Ricardo, but in his own terms, by introducing surplus value. Then he discusses the length of the working day, which is chapter 10 of Capital, which is a fantastic chapter, by the way. How the working day is determined, how the length of the working day is determined. Then he discusses, later on, chapter 15, discusses machinery, the issue of machinery, and capital accumulation. Where that's a fantastic chapter which has been very important for many economic historians. Namely the fact that an economy, an advanced economy, is no longer manufacturing but is machinofacturing. That machinery is required in every process of production. And then chapter 25 comes up with the general law after we put everything together. After chapter 25 in volume 1, you have the book 8 of volume 1, which is the theory of primitive accumulation. Okay? Book 8. I think you should have put primitive accumulation at the very first, the beginning, before chapter 25, because what I'm going to do is to use these two together. The talk that he gave at the First International is really